and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA, where you can take a break from the presidential campaign and hear what's happening in the rest of the world.
Fat chance.
I'm Andy Hum. We'll talk about it a little.
Who would want to take a break from this train wreck?
Are you kidding?
Although I have to say, I was watching MSNBC. I said I'm Ann Northrup.
Hey, you're Ann Northrup.
Yeah, I was watching NBC the other day, and it, nonstop place for politics. And I thought someone had mentioned CNN to me recently, and I thought, I haven't seen that for a while. Why don't I turn that on? Oh my God, they're talking about Syria. They're talking about domestic affairs. They're talking about all sorts of stuff. And I thought, man, I have just jumped down the rabbit hole and watching nothing but politics.
Right.
I better move on.
All right. And we have a little program announcement for our viewers who watch us on Free Speech TV. Mm-hmm. They're going to be going into their spring pledge drive starting on March the 7th and going through March 27th. So during that time, if you're setting your DVRs for us, the premiere show will be on Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and the repeats will be on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. 777.
But not Friday.
Not on Friday, and regular programming will resume on March 28th.
Right, so this will start next week. Check your guides.
Just for free speech viewers, not for everybody else.
And you can always find us online at gayusatv.org if you get confused.
This is important. We understand we had a little kerfuffle in Philadelphia last week with technical stuff, but if the show doesn't come up when it's supposed to come up, go to gayusatv.org, and you can listen to an audio podcast, or you can
watch the show
on YouTube. And we get that up. Bill Ballman, our associate producer, gets that up for us, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. In the headlines, we start with some good news. All the state legislatures are meeting, and most of them are not being too nice to us. But the governor of South Dakota vetoed an anti-transgender bill, and another bill there in South Dakota and elsewhere, anti-gay bill, was sidelined.
Yeah, it's interesting as these proceed. You won't hear about that on MSNBC, but you will hear about it here. Also, the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, has filed 2 lawsuits calling discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation sex discrimination. This is the first time they have directly gone to court to try to claim this.
In Fayetteville, Arkansas, the LGBT rights law there has survived a state legal challenge.
And it's a very interesting decision. Not so interesting. An elder of the Mormon Church this week explained why the Mormon Church has no homosexual members.
That was the phrase that he used.
Yes.
Italy has made progress towards civil unions at the expense of adoption rights. They say they may revive the effort to open adoption to gay couples, but we'll see.
Yes. PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, has for the first recorded time failed a gay man who was exposed to a resistant strain of HIV. We'll explain the details.
If you can't hang in there, about 1% of strains are resistant. We will give you our LGBT perspective on the Oscars.
Andy will review Mario Cantone and Ralph Macchio in a play about growing up in Greenwich Village in the 70s.
And the Broadway transfer of Stephen Karam's The Humans.
Well, we've been starting every week for the last month or so with news about pro and anti, mostly anti-LGBT legislation in the states, which are the battlegrounds at the moment, the front lines.
Thank goodness the Texas legislature isn't meeting. More about that later. More about Texas later.
But we have specifically in the last week or two been focusing on South Dakota, which had passed a very bad anti-trans student bill that said specifically that transgender students could not use the restrooms or other facilities, locker rooms, of their current gender identity. It specifically forbade it, although the law said, well, you can make special arrangements for single-sex bathrooms or something.
So lots of pushback, obviously, from the LGBT movement there and from corporations that base themselves in South Dakota, including places like Citibank.
So this passed the legislature, and we've been waiting to see what the governor, the Republican governor of South Dakota, would do.
His name is Dennis Daugaard.
We have a picture of him
there.
He is a good northern Midwest Republican.
And he said he would meet with a transgender young person, and he did.
With more than one. He said, first of all, that he had never met a transgender person.
I have heard gay adults say this to me in their 70s.
Of course. He, however, had the power to either sign or veto this bill. And he said he'd never met anyone who was transgender. So a group of trans kids and their parents went to meet with him. And according to one of the kids, they had a very good conversation. This kid called the governor kind and open and thoughtful. And when it came down to the deadline, the governor vetoed the bill.
Are you saying that politicians can be moved by rationality and humanity?
Well, there's some thought that he saw the example of what had happened in other states and did not want his state to become the focus of controversy over, being described as a hate state.
Oil revenues are down, too.
Yes.
That's not, I don't want to be cynical about it.
And a lot of major corporations did speak up against the bill. There was also concern that this bill is illegal. It runs contrary to rules from the Obama administration.
And he said that in his veto message. He said it doesn't address any pressing issue, and it could create liability issues for the state. Now, and then the sponsor of the bill said, well, we're not going to seek an override.
Well, it's not quite the end of the story. First of all, the right-wing legal groups had offered to come in and help and work pro bono to defend the state in any litigation if, in fact, they signed the bill and passed it, and it was challenged by the federal government. And the governor's message said, not only do we not want to become the focus of litigation, but even though we've had this offer of help from the right-wing alliance defending freedom or whatever, it won't be sufficient. There will still be costs to the state and the local districts and everything. And we think this is a rare occurrence and something that should be solved with local control.
Yes.
And that...
although it will, issues around this will happen more and more because more and more transgender teens are coming out.
And more local schools and other facilities will figure out how to deal with it on a local basis, as many of them already have. What happens is that we've seen case after case where the school's dealing with it fine, or the kids are dealing with it fine, the fellow students. And then someone comes in from outside, the Alliance Defending Freedom,
or
one
parent complains,
yes, and then the whole thing blows up. So left to their own devices with people who know each other and are dealing with each other on a daily basis, you have a lot better chance of solving this than by passing, as the governor says, some statewide ban that is only going to get everybody in trouble.
Right.
So,
right. Well, so anyway, good on South Dakota. Good on their Republican governor. We like to say good things about Republicans if we can, or Democrats, but that's progress. Okay. Let's hopscotch some other states. In Utah, there was a public accommodations protection bill opposed for the LGBT protection. Yes, proposed. Yes. And it was pulled from consideration. The Mormon Church, more about which later, doesn't seem to like that.
Didn't like the bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the sponsor, this was a pro-LGBT bill, withdrew it. He said the timing wasn't right. We're going to focus on hate crimes legislation first.
Okay.
Good news from West Virginia, where the House had passed a heinous Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The Senate gutted it. They added amendments that said, all right, we can pass this, but none of this can override non-discrimination rules and laws. And the whole point of these bills is to override non-discrimination laws, to say that if you have a personal religious objection to any person, you can do whatever you want in the way of discriminating. But the Senate in West Virginia added this amendment that said, no, 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 you cannot override non-discrimination laws. And thus the bill is regarded as dead in the water because the House won't agree to this, and so nothing is going to happen with it, and it's dead. And that is a great victory for us.
In Arkansas, where I will be making a personal appearance next week, I'm going to go visit my sister and my nieces and nephews there in Little Rock, a state judge upheld the Fayetteville anti-discrimination ordinance, which protects LGBT people, ruling it does not conflict with state law that the state law tried to block local LGBT rights laws, but the state sort of made a mistake in that they had covered LGBT in something.
Yes.
And way back when. And
yeah, they don't have a statewide anti-discrimination law, but they do have other laws that include protection of sexual orientation or gender identity, and thus our side said, "Oh, we are covered in state law, so you can't say that this is a new protection."
But to my friends in Arkansas, your state attorney general is going to appeal the ruling and use your tax money fruitlessly, we hope.
In Kentucky, a Senate committee has passed a Religious Freedom Restoration Act that allows businesses to discriminate and that allows schools to conduct, to have performances of religious plays.
And this is a threat to, this also is a threat to the local LGBT rights laws that they have in Kentucky.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Now, there's a lot of focus, this week's focus is on Georgia, where they have a big Religious Freedom Restoration Act on deck to be passed.
400 companies have said they're against this, and the Salesforce CEO, Mark Benioff, said he's trying to head it off the way he did in Indiana, help with that, and he said that they're going to pull their conference in May in Atlanta, 15,000 people, if they don't stop this.
But there's a way for you to get involved in this, just as in South Dakota, the businesses objected, the trans kids and parents met with the governor, and thousands of people from South Dakota and all over the country wrote to the governor and objected to the bill, and that had a major effect also on killing it. And there's something called, we've mentioned this before.
First we have track LGBT bills. How you track LGBT bills in your area, you go to equalityfederation.org, and you can find out about that. But you've got another way to get involved.
Well, we have told you before about a new attempt called the National Equality Action Team, NEAT. NEAT.
And they call it theneat.org.
In their website. So NEAT is organizing phone banking and tweeting from around the country against the Georgia bill. That's their main focus, and in favor of passing a gender identity and expression non-discrimination bill in Massachusetts, which has been lacking one, as does New York. So if you go to theneat.org, you can find out how to get involved from your very own home in fighting the bad Georgia bill and helping pass the Massachusetts bill.
While New York does not have gender identity and expression in the law, the governor did all these executive orders, which they say will cover much of it. We're going to get to it later, but you can use the law anywhere in the country to claim sex discrimination when you are discriminated against based on being transgender.
Leading us, as a nice segue, to what the EEOC did this week. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has for some time now been very progressive about interpreting some federal regulations against sex discrimination as including sexual orientation discrimination and gender identity and expression discrimination.
They pretty much solidified it around gender identity and expression first, and now they're saying sexual orientation too, because when we're discriminated against because we're gay, it's because we step outside of our gender roles.
Yes, and that is why we're discriminated against. So it makes perfect sense. They've solidified it in their own thinking and in their own cases, but these have to then be accepted by courts, and there are mixed records in the courts. Well, they have supported some lawsuits, and we have won some cases, and we have lost some cases where we have tried to claim that sexual orientation discrimination is sex discrimination. Well, the EEOC has now taken 2 cases, one in Maryland, one in Pennsylvania, and is suing the companies that are charged with discriminating against employees on the basis of sexual orientation. The EEOC is going directly to court with these cases and claiming that this sexual orientation discrimination is sex discrimination under Title VII.
And these employees that they're suing on behalf of were harassed on the job because of their sexual orientations.
Yes, and the thinking is that these cases may ultimately end up at the Supreme Court, should the Supreme Court ever get a 9th member and be deciding cases.
Maybe Anthony Kennedy will like the idea.
Maybe Clarence Thomas will do a turnaround.
We never know. Now that Scalia's not looking over his, or as Trump said the other day, Salika. He says Salika. I said, who do I want to replace Salika with? And Anderson Cooper and all these idiots on CNN are sitting there going, nothing. Like, do you even know who he is? Could you maybe tell us a decision that he's made in the past 30 years?
Name all the members of the Supreme Court.
Well, I mean, I think we could do that. I don't expect most people to do that, but
I expect a candidate for president of the United States
was a great figure, right?
I do expect a candidate for president to be able to do that.
Okay.
By the way, as a viewer pointed out to me, all the Republicans in Congress are getting up on their high horses now. Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell saying, you know, how dare Trump be bigoted and support bigotry by not, being quick enough against David Duke.
And the KKK.
And the viewer said to me, are you kidding me? These guys who have been discriminating against us and been bigots on their own for so many years are condemning him for bigotry?
Well,
I thought that was a good insight.
I mean, Donald, you have to learn the code words. You can't say it directly. All right.
But one thing the Supreme Court did do this week is reject again, for the second or third time, a challenge to the New Jersey court decision that said organizations could not offer conversion therapy to minors.
They just didn't take the case, so those things are winning.
Yeah.
And the people who did the stuff in New Jersey have gone off to Israel to practice it.
Speaking of which, did you know that Israel gave all the Academy Award people trips to Israel in their goodie bags?
No, I didn't.
Yes, they did.
Well,
wait a minute, I'm jumping the gun. 10-day trips to Israel.
I watched some special about the what do they call them?
Swag bags.
Swag bags.
Goodie bags.
They're worth like $30,000.
Oh, much more.
It's insane.
Much more.
And that's the main reason people seem to want to go.
Well,
I mean,
wouldn't you?
They're already rich.
Well, that's what's so amusing is, I watch these talk shows.
Do you get them when you're nominated for Best Short Documentary?
Sure.
Oh, boy.
I watch these talk shows during the day where they're doing giveaways or deals, and the hosts always walk off with all the goodies, and I think, for God's sake, you're the hosts of these shows. You're making plenty. And
people like free stuff.
Well, they certainly do.
All right, let's go back to the news. Yeah. All right. In Texas, school officials, superintendents voted to require the schools to use a birth certificate to determine a student athlete's gender. This is a end run, and rather than changing the law, they're just making this the policy. It's totally against transgender students, and I understand we have a new member on the statewide board.
On the school board. This is the University Interscholastic League, but the Texas school board has a horrible bigot on the school board.
Who ran on a platform of Obama being a former prostitute. She's one of 15 people going to be making decisions for the schools in Texas.
Yes.
Wake up!
And she has a much longer list of
sins. I shouldn't just say Texas, because we have a horrible state senate in New York.
You should really Google the story on the new Republican county chairman in Travis County, Texas.
Can we talk a little bit about him?
Which is Austin.
His name is Rob Morrow. He didn't even campaign, he said.
Not the actor Rob Morrow.
Or spend any money, and he got elected. Well, let's go. He's the new chair. Now, Austin, of course, Travis County is a very blue area, very Democratic area. But he spent the night tweeting on election night about Governor Rick Perry's sexual orientation, about how Hillary Clinton was an angry bull dyke, about how wait a minute, what's the other?
Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio is likely a gay man who got married. This is stuff. So this is rather upsetting.
I kind of believe that.
This is rather upsetting. The mainstream Republicans, such as they are, there in Texas. And this is about,
his language is over the top. This is a mild version.
He says, they don't like it, they can F themselves, is what he said. And this is where Governor Greg Abbott's home party.
Yes.
That's where he's from.
Yes.
So
more fun in Texas.
The vice chair of the party said his Twitter account is something no child should see.
Well, I don't think anyone should see Ted Cruz's new Religious Liberty Council. Marco Rubio put together his marriage and religion council or something. Ted Cruz has now announced a Religious Liberty Council supporting him, including Bishop Harry Jackson from Maryland, the guy who fought so hard against same-sex marriage in D.C. Tony Perkins is the chair of Cruz's Religious Liberty Council. Ken Blackwell, the monster from Ohio, the Benham brothers. When Lindsey Graham is saying that, Lindsey Graham said he would support Ted Cruz over Trump.
Really?
Yes. And he said, I can't believe I'm saying this.
Most Republicans call it a choice between death by hanging and death by poison. But we're not partisan here.
Yeah.
We're just very frightened.
Yes, we are. We certainly are. All right, as you say, back to the news. The University of Washington has put out a study published in Pediatrics magazine. They studied 73 trans kids ages 3 to 12, very young transitioning kids, and they said that trans kids who are supported in their identities, young trans kids when they announce their real identities and are supported by their families, show very positive mental health outcomes. They are not crazy. They are not anxious and depressed. They succeed and have very positive outcomes.
Okay. I'll give you a good story. It starts out bad. This is from Richmond, Virginia. A trans woman was fired right after being hired by KFC, the chicken place, Georgia Carter, 27, because she was transgender. And the KFC manager ended up being fired for firing her, and they reaffirmed their anti-discrimination policy and offered her a job at any KFC that she wants.
The manager,
$7.50 an hour.
Yeah, the manager who hired her and then saw her driver's license and fired her said, "Well, which bathroom would you use?"
At the KFC?
Yeah. Thanks.
Do they have? Well,
in Tennessee, as long as we're in that neighborhood, in Nashville, the National Religious Broadcasters were holding their convention, and Rick Warren was speaking, and Soul Force, 25 members of Soul Force, showed up to disrupt his speech.
Yeah.
We have a little picture of them marching through the convention.
Stop killing us by quoting the Bible is basically what they're saying. It's this. It's
Leviticus 19:16.
Which is the thing that says we should be put to death.
Yeah.
That's the page that Ian McKellen tears out of Bibles in hotel rooms.
They were thrown out of the conference, but very nice to know that somebody's still out there doing a little objecting to bigotry.
Maybe they need to go after the Mormon Church again, because Elder David Bednar said, there are no homosexual members of the church. We are not defined by sexual attraction. He said same-sex attraction is not a sin, but it is when we act on the inclination, it becomes a sin. I think he worships a false god. And it's not just because he's Mormon. A lot of people worship this false god that says that we're evil, and that's an evil teaching.
There was a gay evangelical who wrote an op-ed piece this week arguing for celibacy as the way to be an out gay evangelical. And it's sad.
Yes.
You know, people can choose to be sexually active or not, but to say that that defines you, that that's how you must act is...
When I was a kid in 1971, Al Carmines, the gay composer, a late gay composer, did a play called, I can say the word here, the play was called The Faggot. It was a bunch of skits about gay life then in the early 70s. And there was a song about what a wonderful way to spend all your life, thinking of reasons not to do something.
Well, that might apply in other areas, but not this.
Yes.
Thank you. We talked about the sins of the Republican Party. The Democratic Party in California has added a pro-trans access to bathrooms plank to their party platform.
Good.
Needed.
In Philadelphia, Catherine Knott, who was sentenced to jail in the gay bashing case there from a couple of years ago because she wanted to go to trial and she was convicted, the judge said he will hear her plea to get out and do a PSA as a punishment. I don't think that's... the guy's jaw is still broken, you know.
Yeah, I don't think she has much credibility for that. Also in Pennsylvania, in Altoona, they are having a local scandal because a grand jury has issued its report saying that Catholic priests abused hundreds of kids in that one town. And of course, it was all covered up for many, many years.
Well, and in Syracuse, the Catholic bishop, Robert Cunningham, in a deposition, said he didn't think priests should take all the blame for the rape of young boys, because after all, they were over 7, and that's the age of reason. They had some culpability for their actions. He said this in a deposition. I mean, unbelievable. People, well, and there was...
And then there's, is it the Archbishop in Australia or something?
Pell,
who said, well, really, I didn't care much about it, so I didn't pay attention.
People gasped when he said this.
Yes.
Well...
The rationalization in their minds is what's hard to
imagine. That's what's obviously in their hearts about this whole thing. Well, they think it's the kids' fault.
That is how they have rationalized it, yes.
Okay. In the Rent Boy case in New York, which was shut down by the Eastern District, and an investigation started by the now Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, they're down to one defendant, and the acting U.S. attorney there, who brought the case, Kelly Curry, has left. Loretta Lynch praised him for making the world safer, not for sex workers.
In California, they've been having a dispute at Indio High School, which is in the Palm Springs area. Some students there have been wearing little anti-gay stickers, you know, a rainbow with the banning signal, the circle with the slash.
Yeah.
So there was a question, is this free speech? Is it hate speech that causes disruption? So at first the school was inclined to say it was free speech and they were allowed to do what they wanted, but now they've asked the students to remove the stickers for now as they continue to debate this. Schools have sort of special circumstances.
That's why some schools just make everybody wear a uniform.
I wore uniforms for many years.
I did too. In Baton Rouge, tragic story, black trans man, we have a picture of him, DeMarcus Stansberry, 30 years old, was shot in the head, shot to death, inside his home. The suspect, Nicholas Matthew, 24, turned himself in. He said it was an accident. He has been charged with negligent homicide.
He said, the shooter said he thought the chamber was empty. Now, why he's pointing a gun at the guy's head at close range remains a question.
Right.
But the DeMarcus, who was killed, had a great reputation. He was working 2 jobs. He had a steady boyfriend. He was beloved, and now he's dead.
Ray Carey of the National LGBTQ Task Force gave an interview after the Creating Change conference. I guess we could call it a debacle. But she says she's not stepping down over those problems. She said there are a lot of opinions out there from people who weren't there. Says the group doesn't have an international mission, so is not going to take a position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Then why did you have all that going on in the first place?
Well, there you are.
I was happy to see that she followed up with people after the convention to talk about the issues. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio has appointed an executive director of a commission on gender equity to deal with issues for women, transgender people, and intersex people.
Ozzy Khalili is her name.
And you know her.
I do.
Yeah, she's been working on immigrant issues and other issues in city government. She
I
is
appreciate
an immigrant from Iran.
And you know, de Blasio introduced this commission at the Pride ceremony, actually, which was interesting. And I like the way that he makes the intersection between gender and LGBT issues. On the other hand, they don't deal well with these moils, these Jewish moils who supervise, in the Orthodox community, these circumcision ceremonies. And 2 more newborn babies have been infected with herpes by these moils, who insist on sucking the blood out of the penis as a purification rite. But if the baby gets herpes, it doesn't have much of an immune system, and some of them have died.
Yep.
Some of them get brain damage. This should be a criminal prosecution, but this is all about, and this is a place where de Blasio has a problem. You've got to separate church and state. You've got to apply secular laws to these things. Otherwise, you might as well have, you could have animal sacrifice and you could have human sacrifice. And in this case, that's what you've got.
For a while, they tried a system of disclosure. Parents had to sign a form that said, I understand that there may be danger involved. That's not going to stop anyone.
And the problem in these cases is the parents in the community, in the Orthodox community, refuse to turn them in who did it.
Should we go back to the Catholic Church?
Sure.
I'm just saying that... It is a universal problem.
I thought you might have another story.
No, I do have other stories, but not that.
By the way, we did talk about, we mentioned Scalia, and of course we're all outraged that Obama's not going to get to make have any appointment that he makes confirmed by the Republican Senate. I just want to impress upon people, if you don't like that situation, signing all these petitions isn't going to do much. It's good to raise consciousness about it. You need a new Senate. Elections can change this whole thing. And if
there are a lot of Republicans up for re-election this year,
yes.
A lot of Republican seats.
And if you get a progressive Senate, then it can confirm all these appointments. And if you don't,
even a reasonable Senate would be an improvement.
Even if Hillary or Bernie were president, you still have a Republican Senate that's so disposed this way. They could say, we're not taking any liberal nominees from you.
And you think they hated Obama? Wait till you see what they do to President Hillary.
Or Bernie.
Yes.
We're nonpartisan.
I'm not advocating.
I know. Exactly.
I'm assuming.
All right.
Alabama. There's a lawyer in Alabama who has filed suit against the 5 members of the Supreme Court of the United States who okayed same-sex marriage. He wants $6 million in damages. I don't know. He feels personally offended. He thinks they broke the law by doing it, whatever.
Well, there was some study about why people are so homophobic, especially against same-sex marriage, and it has something to do with the threat that they think their marriages are being devalued. They really feel this way. And they also say that this feeling is part of what drives the Trump movement.
Sure.
That people feel displaced, that they're what they counted on as traditional, and now they want someone authoritarian to take hold.
No, they feel humiliated.
Or as Ann would say, daddy is what they want.
Yes, they do. who will take care of everything for them and solve everything for them so they don't have to.
Do you think any of the Trump attacks on Marco Rubio were homophobic? Calling him Little Marco?
I have made homophobic attacks on Marco Rubio. In Utah, a House committee, by a vote of 5-5, rejected equal adoption and foster care rights for same-sex couples. They are claiming that the Supreme Court marriage decision should not be extrapolated to parenthood issues, that it's only about marriage.
Right.
It's not about parenthood. Right. Just because you can get married doesn't mean you have some right to adopt children.
Well, we didn't win the whole 9 yards with the marriage decision.
I would submit that we did, and
we'll see
but clearly it's going to have to be litigated further.
Yes.
All right, can we move to international news?
Yes.
Right.
In
Italy.
Yeah, that's the big news, because they dropped the bill that is going to do civil unions. They dropped the adoption thing, which was very controversial, and at least in Italy, and they passed the civil unions bill 173-91. Interestingly, Prime Minister Renzi made this a confidence vote. I've never heard of a world leader saying, "I will lose my seat as the Prime Minister if you don't vote for this," because that's how strongly I feel about it.
I don't fully understand how that has to be put on the line, but at any rate, the Senate passed the compromise bill. The government is preparing to submit a separate bill that would give the adoption rights, because our people are so up in arms at this being a second-class bill. Well, so they want to at least make the gesture, but
the new bill would apply to gay couples, but it would also apply to single people. Now, it seems like what they're most alarmed about is surrogacy. They're very much against surrogacy there.
It's illegal. It's illegal for everybody.
To prevent it.
Yeah.
Well, they think it's
Meanwhile, a court in Rome has, in the case of a lesbian couple who went to court, each with their own biological daughter, asking to adopt each other's child, the Rome court said yes. So what happens is that case by case, you can actually win these rights, but it's not a blanket right, and it's a hurdle to be jumped every time you want to do this. So we'd like to go beyond that, but it's nice that the court went ahead and did it.
That's the way same-sex marriage is progressing in Mexico. Well, in Bermuda, now the government is calling, where they've been ordered to recognize, like, your foreign-born partner to coming into the country, being allowed to work.
And that has gone into effect now.
This week. But the government is now calling a referendum on same-sex marriage and civil unions, and
which gay people are upset about.
They're
because
bitterly
they say
disappointed.
It should not be a public vote on rights. The government should have the guts to go ahead and legalize it.
I was so happy when Wyoming's Republican legislature voted down doing a referendum and a constitutional amendment. They said, "Folks, this is just going to we're a small state. It's going to tear us apart if you do this. Don't do this," and that should be the way it happens.
Well, and similarly with the governor of South Dakota this week, he saw a state law as being terribly divisive and upsetting, and said, "Look, we can handle this at the local level."
We dodged a bullet in Switzerland. The people narrowly rejected an initiative. It was ostensibly about tax reform, but it would have prevented same-sex couples from marrying. So it only lost by less than 1%.
Yeah, it was a secret little clause in the proposed bill, but we saw through it.
They're getting sneaky there.
Well, they're not so sneaky in Indonesia. They're just coming at us full force. The Islamic Jihad Front,
for that is what it is called,
protested the Muslim Academy for Transgender Women,
which was opened in 2008.
And it has been closed down. The defense minister in Indonesia says LGBT people are more dangerous than nuclear weapons.
And then a former cabinet, there's a lot of anti-gay stuff going on in Indonesia now. It's becoming a trend. A former cabinet minister there, who's now a member of parliament, called for the death penalty for homosexuality, and then he pulled the tweet and he said, "I was getting bullied over this." He was getting bullied. You want to put us to death? Holy moly.
All this seems to have started just in the last few months, and it's like
it's a panic.
It is. It's exactly that. It's a panic that is sweeping Indonesia, which is the 4th largest country in the world.
Well, people go from not being able to talk about homosexuality at all publicly, and then when they can, they often do it negatively.
Well, they go through a phase.
Well,
Meanwhile, a lot of people suffer.
I mean, I kind of like the way, you know, in the presidential campaign, you know, Hillary and Bernie always mention us, basically, in their speeches. And the other side doesn't mention us specifically. They talk about religious freedom and all that kind of stuff, but they're afraid to directly attack us.
So far.
All right.
In Tunisia, a gay group has won the right to operate. The government had shut them down, but now they have gone to court and won the legal right to exist. Did you see Michael Moore's Where to Invade Next?
I have not.
Well, I have. And I found it a little naive. You know, it's all these stories of the, you know, France has great school lunches, and Italy has great paid vacations and family leave, and Norway has great prisons, and I'm going to take all these things for America.
Do they have a gay cable show?
Not that we've seen. But I thought, you know, there are a lot of bad things going on in these countries, and to portray them all as these paradises.
Well, you know, my old friends at Advocates for Youth, which does teen sexuality, they did a film about how great it was in Europe on teen sexuality, and then they do teach the kids more. But you can't transfer these things culturally. You got to do it your own way. It never impresses Americans that better things are happening in other
yes,
places.
But my objection is different, which is that he's overlooking a lot of
the drawbacks,
the anti-Semitism in France and violence.
And then there's the anti-gay sentiment in Romania, where my paternal grandparents are from. They collected 1.2 million signatures to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot to ban same-sex marriage. And I guess I won't be going back to explore my roots there.
Well, maybe they won't pass that referendum.
It's Eastern Europe's still pretty conservative.
I know. I'm just fantasizing.
In Gaza, a Hamas commander, Mahmoud Tiwi, 34 years old, was accused of homosexual activity, among other things.
We have a picture of him.
And he was shot by his former comrades. And he was a really high
Hamas leader, Mahmoud Tiwi.
Yeah, well,
picture?
I mean, there he is. We're not going to show you the picture of him in the Times, where he's laid out dead. He allegedly carved the word wronged into his body because he felt he's survived by a wife and 2 kids.
No, 2 wives and 3 kids.
Sorry. Oh, God. Well, I must have read that wrong. The new leader of Hamas's political wing apparently wants the army to be purer.
He was also accused of stealing money from the organization for his own uses to support the 2 wives and 3 kids.
The remarkable thing about the story, and the reason we're talking about it, is because the family is talking about it.
Yes.
And that's unusual there.
Well, they say he was wrongly accused.
Yes.
Good news from the Isle of Man between England and Ireland. The marriage bill for same-sex marriage is advancing there, and they managed to kill the proposed Religious Freedom Restoration Act amendments that were proposed to, you know, exempt clerks from giving licenses or performing marriages or whatever. So that's good.
And they're willing to open civil partnerships to non-gay couples which the rest of the United Kingdom is not willing to do. Mm-hmm. So good on the Isle of Man, which will, I hope, someday be the Isle of Men and Women.
And good on Canada. A couple of good stories there.
Yeah.
First of all, Health Canada, the National Health Service there, I assume, has approved financing Truvada as PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis. They were hesitating on that, but they've come through on that now. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
There he is in his pink shirt.
He wore the pink shirt for Pink Shirt Day. It is an anti-LGBT bullying event every year now.
He's going to be the first prime minister to march in a pride parade this summer.
Yep.
I think in Toronto?
Yes, I think so.
All right.
And a nice story from the United Nations. Our ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, has been very active as a pro-LGBT force within the United Nations, and she decided her fellow ambassadors needed some education, and she rounded up 17 of them and took them to see Fun Home on Broadway, the lesbian musical.
And the best musical on Broadway.
Yes, Tony Award-winning, fantastic
Great show.
play. Alison Bechtel, Lisa Crone wrote it. And directed, and Gene Tesori did the music. We've raved about it forever. We've seen it in all its incarnations. You should see it. Fun
And this
Home.
is the best one.
So Samantha Power takes the ambassadors from Russia, Namibia, Vietnam, and 14 other countries, and some of them said they had no idea what they were going to see.
Did they like it?
They did like it, and they said it...
It's a shame we can't have this in our country.
They said, you know, you deal with one of the ambassadors said, you deal with issues theoretically all day. It's nice to see it playing out with real people. And they held a panel discussion afterwards with the writers and cast, moderated by our new best friend, Cynthia Nixon.
Thank you, Cynthia.
For the ambassadors, and evidently had a good discussion. There should be more of this kind of education going on.
Much more.
All right.
Oh, and by the way, speaking of marching, I'll be out there at the St. Pat's for All parade in Queens this weekend.
Sunday.
And of course, on March 17th, we got a march in the regular St. Patrick's Day parade now that we're allowed in that.
Details to come, but yes, the very wonderful down-home St. Pat's for All parade, which was created when LGBT people were banned from the big St. Patrick's Day parade
Back in 2000,
Avenue.
Which was a long time ago.
So Brendan Fay and company started the St. Pat's for All parade in Queens, and it's a wonderful neighborhood affair with representatives from every community, every ethnic group.
Out in Sunnyside.
So look up St. Pat's for All if you'd like to be part of that on Sunday.
Yeah, 1 o'clock kickoff.
All right, AIDS news. More news coming out of the CROI conference in, let's not start with that. Let's start with a really big headline.
The big news is that a gay man who was taking PrEP, which is Truvada, and he was adherent daily, but he's the first to get HIV on the drug. And the thing is, he got a drug-resistant type of the virus, so condoms are still needed if people are going to protect themselves.
He had intercourse with someone who had a strain, or many strains of the virus actually, which were resistant to the 2 drugs that are in the PrEP version of Truvada.
Now, we should say less than 1% of strains are resistant to these drugs.
The other thing is that this guy was not taking his treatment medication, so his viral load was not suppressed. Even if you have drug-resistant...
You're talking about the guy who gave it to him?
Yes. If you are, in fact, suppressing those drug-resistant strains, then you may not be transmitting it.
That is, by the way, the way we're going to end the epidemic, is by getting people tested on treatment, not infecting other people through that method.
Yes.
And they are also working on some new versions of PrEP.
Yes, and people, when they are put on treatment, they are tested, or should be, for what treatments work for them, and therefore what treatments they are not resistant to. So that plays into all this too. But yes, condoms are still important, but this is the first case that has been documented of HIV transmission to someone who was on PrEP.
Keep using condoms.
Now, I've been a little, congratulations to the University of Central Florida, the second largest university in the country.
Who knew?
60,000.
Now you do. And
800 students. They are now offering PrEP on their health plan or whatever.
And Health Canada is doing it.
Yes, I mentioned that in the international news.
Right.
And more news. I wanted to clear something up. I've been a little confused. The information coming out of the AIDS conference in Boston. Injectables are being developed both for PrEP and for treatment. So we've been discussing these, but a little confused about which is which. Both are under development. Both are quite a ways from being generally available, but both show a lot of promise.
Speaking of treatment, another study has found that when you hand drugs, treatment drugs, to people who test positive right then and there, as opposed to having them come back and go see somebody, it increases the taking of the drugs and adherence dramatically.
Yeah. What a concept. You test positive, you're actually handed the drugs.
Okay.
All right, entertainment news.
How about those Oscars? I mean,
they were a mess, is really what they were.
Oh, well, I mean, I kind
Some
of enjoyed Chris Rock. Some people were very critical. I thought, but most of his jokes I thought landed. Yeah, but there were some gay aspects to it, and I was most surprised to see Holly Woodlawn turn up in the in memoriam section, especially since they didn't have a lot of big stars in it or anything. But you know, good on them for including Holly Woodlawn.
Perhaps they were trying to affect diversity in the in memoriam. That was actually my read of it. And of course, my favorite Chris Rock line was, in memoriam this year will include black men shot by police on their way to movie theaters, which I thought was breathtakingly bold. And
in terms of the awards,
excellent.
I mean, what were the LGBT aspects? Well, Alicia Vikander won for The Danish Girl for Best Supporting Actress. She was, of course, the wife of the transgender woman.
Chris Rock said in introducing Cate Blanchett that Carol was the third best women in love movie he'd seen this year.
Now, Sam Smith, you know...
I agree.
Sam Smith won for Best Original Song, and when he received the award, he said he had read that Ian McKellen said that no openly gay man had ever won an Oscar, and then said, I want to dedicate this to the LGBT community around the world. I stand here tonight as a proud gay man and hope we can stand together as equals one day. That's a pretty, you know, that's pretty strong.
Fine.
Now, of course, there have been many other out gay Oscar winners, many closeted ones, and Rock made a joke afterwards about not telling a joke after he said that, but I think that some people were offended by that, but I think what Chris was sort of saying is there were no gay Oscar winners. I can tell you quite a few. Anyway.
Well, whatever he was saying. But, you know, Sam Smith, to the extent that Ian McKellen may have had a point, it was a very narrow point about best male actor or whatever. Sam Smith won for writing the best song, and, you know, we've had Elton John, we've had Melissa Etheridge, we've had plenty in his category alone.
But then among the songs, the trans songwriter Anoni was not allowed to perform her nominated song.
Yeah, that was very strange. What was that about? And who did perform it?
I don't know if I don't even know if it was performed. You'll tell us, I'm sure. But in terms of trans actors, Maya Taylor of Tangerine became the first trans actress to win a major film award. We have a picture of her at the Spirit Awards, which were held the night before the Oscars for independent films. And the movie is about two transgender prostitutes, and she gave a very charming and important speech.
Well, one thing she said, this is a movie that was famously shot on iPhones.
Yes.
And she said, when I heard about this, I thought this wasn't going to be S. But it turned out to be great. And in fact, I can't wait to, I'm sorry I missed it in theaters. I hope to catch up with it on television eventually. But she said, I came from nothing. Doing this movie turned my life around.
And you need to think about us more when you're casting movies.
A lot of trans talent out there.
Sure.
Now, she kept sort of joking and looking seductively at the audience and winking and saying, you know, there's a lot of trans talent. You might want to think about some of us. And,
sure.
And angling for her next job, but really supporting the idea that trans talent is out there for both trans roles and non-trans roles.
Yeah. Hey, Ellen Page has a new gay TV show on Viceland called Gaycation.
Yeah.
Where she and a gay friend roam the world to check out the gay scene.
Well, the most obnoxious thing is the promo for it, where she's sitting in the back of a car and saying, you know, gay people suffer this and this and this. Who would choose to be gay? I'm so sick of that. So, you know, you want to choose to be gay? Fine.
We've done it for years, and we like it.
Carol didn't win an Oscar, but did win for cinematography at the Independent Spirit Awards.
At the Independent Spirit Awards, yes, not at the Oscars.
Yeah. And the Beasts of No Nation actors, Abraham Atta, the kid, won Best Actor at the Spirit Awards, and Idris Elba won Best Supporting Actor. If you have not seen Beasts of No Nation, and I know you have not,
I have the DVD at home already.
Well, there were a lot of jokes about how Beasts of No Nation is the movie that everybody has the DVD and no one has watched yet because they all think it's going to be depressing.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's taken you how long to get around to this? You have not watched it yet. I watched it, and I loved it.
I had to get ready for this show.
Oh, please.
All right.
You've had it for weeks.
Dot.
Beasts of No Nation.
Okay.
Watch that movie.
A couple of theater notes. Dot, which we saw at the Vineyard Theater by Coleman Domingo, has been extended to March 24th. And on March 22nd, David Hyde Pierce and Susan Stroman, the director, are going to be doing an after, audience discussion.
We enjoyed it. We thought it was a little over the top, but I sat through the whole thing.
Yeah, and Nora Burns, an old gay cable network veteran, is reprising her show, David's Friend, at Dixon Place on March 21st at 7:30 p.m.
You have a couple of reviews.
I do. I saw, Tony Speciale has taken over as artistic director of the Abington Theater Company there on 36th Street, and the first production is A Room of My Own. We got a picture of it. Charles Messina's memory play of growing up in 1979 in the Village in one room with his mother and his brother and his father and his sister. Not a brother. The mother has an upstairs gay brother played by Mario Cantone, who does Mario Cantone. Ralph Macchio there in the foreground plays the narrator. And but the real hit of the show is this kid he's sitting there with. The actor's name is Nico Bustamante, as a 10-year-old who hilariously matches the vulgarity of his parents' F words for F word. You can really feel for his desire to have a room of his own.
The
which is
year
what
of the
it's all
boy.
about.
This guy.
Well, yeah.
The Abraham Atta and Beasts of No Nation, Tremblay and Room. They're all just fantastic.
It's a funny play. It's a light play. It's got some heart, but it's very vulgar. Then I saw The Humans at the Helen Hayes Theater. Now, this is the Broadway transfer by out playwright Stephen Karam. It's the best reviewed play of the season, which puts a lot of pressure on it when you go in there and you're sitting there.
Yep.
It's got a good cast with Jane Howdy-Shell as the mom of a family from Scranton visiting their daughter in a crappy but large apartment in Chinatown. My problem is that more of the humor arises from jokes than from the situation, and there's an introduction of something mysterious that is out of left field, I think. And there's a lesbian sister, and her lesbian sister's not an issue at all, which is the new trend,
Yes,
Let's throw the gay characters in, and it's just, part of it.
Routine.
Anyway, they also try to throw in big events like 9/11 and things like that to lend importance to it. So I thought it was actually kind of slight. I just wasn't getting why people said this was the greatest play of the season. It's not so bad, but
maybe you'll prefer the second season of I Am Kate.
Oh,
starting Sunday on E!
Is she coming out as a Democrat or something?
No, I haven't heard that. She may come out as dating men.
Right.
Which is controversial.
Because she's always been attracted to women.
Yes. And so is she shying away from being a lesbian? Is she, what is she? So I Am Kate Season 2 E this weekend, and Free Speech TV in pledge mode starting next week.
Yes, so we'll be on starting on Saturday nights.
And
right?
Franklin Graham is boycotting Girl Scout cookies because of the Oscars.
Him too?
That was the most charming
Chris
thing.
Rock isn't boycotting them.
Yeah. All right. See you next week.